We go right. Any more coming down? Or is it? Dave, come in. Come properly. Chair.
You're in trouble.
Which one next door? Good morning everyone and welcome to our show and share. So just to give you a bit of background on what these sessions are about, these are basically about us showing and sharing with you what the team's been doing over the last 2 weeks and giving you an update and giving you a chance to ask questions and feedback on what we've been doing. So this is, most of you have been here a few times before, this is the ambition of the project. You'll see there in the bottom section there's some words highlighted in orange, those are what we're focusing on. And it's really good if we can get any feedback on how things are going and whether you think that we are actually achieving this going forward. So when we started the project, we looked at the vision for the project, which with the ambition that we had before, and also we got a couple of comments from Jennifer as head of service about how she felt the service and this project should go. And these are them. In particular, the one on the left, everything that everybody does should be geared around preventing homelessness. Has become a bit of a mantra for the project, and that's what we're focusing on going forward. So, looking at the service we can offer, this is our triangle based on need. So, at the top of it, our aim is to move our customers that don't need so much support and help from us onto digital self-service light touch tools. This in turn should free up staff time from focusing on them to focusing on people that need more help. So as we move down the triangle, we've got those in the middle that we might need a bit more support and coaching, a bit more nudging, kind of a bit more like the service we provide to everybody at the moment. And then ultimately at the bottom, as anybody who works in the service and in other service in the council realises, we've got so many people presenting with multiple and complex problems that that's where we want to focus staff time and effort. So hopefully by moving people around the triangle, preferably to the self-service bit as much as possible, we free up staff time for the bits at the bottom. So then this translates into our tube map for Hackney. So along the orange line, that's the self-service line. The key bit, the approach could be anywhere in the service or other services within the council, benefit changing circumstances, preventing us homeless, referrals from third parties. And the key to the whole journey is that section there that says understanding vulnerability, and this is what a lot of the work has been focusing on in the last 2 weeks. So then those, like we say, that are able to help themselves will proceed along the orange line at the top, advice, insights, posting, self-source tools, ultimately to the common goal of finding and maintaining a settled home. Those that require a bit more help will go down the middle line, the light blue line, where we will create a shared plan to support them, and then we'll be checking in with staff and some nudging along that. And then again we have those at the bottom that we know have multiple and complex problems, so they will need much more multidisciplinary support and casework. That will involve a lot more follow-up conversations and a lot more linking up sections within the council. So to back up the service and the project, we developed these 6 principles, which ops managers have done some work on, and we're starting to do some work on them with team managers, so there'll be more on those going forward. So today's focus, so as I already said, the key point to the whole journey is understanding vulnerability, so we'll be updating on that. We'll also be updating on everybody's favourite, the single view, and there'll be further updates on the tools that we've been using for information and evidence. So over to understanding vulnerability.
There are a couple of seats at the front if we want to come. So as Claire said, one of the key points in the journey is understanding a resident's level of vulnerability, and off the back of that making a decision about what level of service or level of intervention is appropriate, from the overground line, which is a bit like touch, down to the multidisciplinary case working. So actually how this could work in practice, understanding vulnerability is quite a broad term. And this might involve a number of different things, from spotting some red flags or things that feel a bit out of the ordinary and that make you think that actually this person might be vulnerable and we could use a bit more support, to understanding that person's context. and building a bigger picture of that situation, where they're at the moment, and using that to help make a decision about what level of service is appropriate. But then all of this is only useful if it starts building into the what next, and what can that person do to help themselves, and what can we do as a council to support them. So building a shared plan and that next step and taking action is going to form part of all of those levels of different types of journeys that people can take, but albeit at kind of different levels. So over the past couple of weeks, we've been working with the team who work around benefits. And just to explain what this process might look like, those red flags could be something like ESA ending. So that person's been on a really high level of benefit would suggest that they had high needs, and then if that ends, that might spark a bit of a flag, and actually something, this person could be vulnerable and later down the line could potentially be presenting as homeless. So there might be something that we could do there. So it could be some trigger events that suggest that that person might be vulnerable. Then off the back of those events, could we get officers to understand a little bit more around the context of that situation? That might be digging through information on different systems and on their file. It might involve phoning the resident and just asking for a bit more information about why that's happened and if there's any support that we can offer them as a council. And of course that leading into that next step of building a shared plan. So actually there might be things that we can do to support them at that early stage, or there might be some things that they can do. So over the past couple of weeks, I've been doing some prototyping with the benefits team, looking at these first two steps. So what are those red flags, and then how can we understand a bit more about the situation to identify if that person is vulnerable, and then in the future that could lead on to a shared plan. So you remember, if you're at the last show and tell, we'd started to pick out some of these indicators that suggested that people could be vulnerable. So we've condensed those into 6. So this at the moment includes someone who has an active case with other services, someone who has a financial vulnerability, like an increasing amount of arrears. They might be demonstrating unusual behaviour, that they could be going through a big change or transition, whether that's leaving care or leaving hospital or being released from prison. They might have gone through an emotional shock, like a bereavement or a separation. And they might be presenting in a way that's quite stressed or overwhelmed, or just something you pick up that this person is like having difficulty in processing this at that point. So we wanted to test these different things with the benefits team and learn a bit more about what are those trigger events that we could pick up on to use this as a bit of a prompt to understand more about that person's context. But then also think about, well, if we do find that someone's vulnerable, what can we do? Is there places at the moment that we could refer them to another team or partners, or actually could we just ask an open question to the resident and see, is there anything else that we can do to support you at this point in time? And I think one of the interesting things that we knew we'd get through learning this is that's all very well and good, but we know that people have other targets and other pressures. And so what are the barriers to working in this way? So, as I said, we've been working with 4 officers in the benefits team to try out a kind of paper version of this as a bit of a prompt. So we're using this diagram. If one of these trigger events happens, and other people suggested there might be other trigger events as well, can they use this as a bit of a checklist to use these as different ways to think about people's vulnerability? Picking up that information from systems, or speaking to the resident themselves to understand those different areas. And then if they come to the decision that that person is vulnerable, we're not suggesting what the threshold is. You will know from your expertise of working with people whether or not this means someone is vulnerable. But what's the follow-up? Is there anything extra that we can do? Or could, again, we ask them that question, how can we help them and what support do they need? So through that testing with 4 officers, we've had some feedback. And I think we are learning that officers already know whether the residents they're working with is vulnerable. And this is actually more of a kind of useful prompt and a way in to working in that way. But kind of recognizing that there might be some cultural barriers as well as like really practical barriers about what people are measured on at the moment and where they feel the pressure, and just feeling like they don't have enough time to work in this way to really offer that next level of additional support and really personalized support. So some of the feedback is, using this as a prompt, I did actually look into their case in more detail than I would have otherwise. And if we had the time, I think we would be looking for that vulnerability. So what my next question is, and what we'll be exploring in the next couple of weeks, is how can we use tools like this as a kind of way in and approach to give you the time and the space and the permission to really work in that way that you want to with the residents, to offer them the level of support that we feel people need.
So kind of feeding on what Emily's been learning, we've been looking at how we can do this digitally. And so we've been looking at how officers can start to kind of surface and log and kind of bring to the fore like these vulnerabilities and red flags. So we've been playing around with Simple View and looking at ways that you could do that on there and how we can kind of create that and show that visually. So I'm going to show you a video actually. Let's flow. So it's quite blurry, but this is kind of an extra box where you click onto there and then you have like a free text box to add vulnerabilities, and on the side are kind of the similar prompts that Emily was using on that wheel, which kind of gives you a little bit of context around particular triggers that might mean that somebody's more vulnerable, and then kind of gives you a bit more detail about what those could be. Then that gives the option for the officers to kind of add a bit more context around that live event or that trigger or that vulnerability, and then add that to their activity log there with a red flag that kind of highlights what that is. And then there'll also be a box here which kind of shows the most recent up-to-date notes, so you can kind of start to kind of get a bit of a log of what those live events are. And so yeah, moving forward we want to look at exploring giving officers the option to be able to do that and see how and what they put in these boxes here, and whether having that there gives officers more of a view of where people are at and start thinking about kind of where those next steps are and what actions need to be taken as a result.
What system is this?
This is single view. Yeah, this is just a mock-up at the minute, so it's not actually on single view, so we're looking at just building that quickly onto single view so we can start testing it in real time with officers. And all the content is kind of following off from Emily's, but a lot of it we want to kind of learn as officers use it, kind of what language and what it needs to look like as they start to use it.
Yeah, so really what's next is by the end of today, we will hopefully have this working on single view. So that means that we can test it with a wider group of people and see what content you're putting in, see how you use it, and make sure that this fits into your current way of working. And then really the most important and exciting bit for me is this next step. So what? They're vulnerable. What can we do to help them? And what is that really, really light touch version of a shared plan? That doesn't have to be a lengthy personal housing plan. It can simply be, okay, here's something that you can do, here's something that we can do. Let's have a phone call and we'll check up in a week. And how can that be a shared responsibility of the whole service? So it comes back to that service vision of Jennifer's, you know, that it's everyone and everything is about preventing homelessness. Single view.
Sorry, can I get a couple of questions?
Yeah,
with regards to I get it's like a sophisticated rate assessment. Does it, with regards to the low-level events, the cumulative impact of low-level events, are we able to pick up on that?
It's something we're exploring. So actually, if we're kind of capturing vulnerabilities over time, so does that cumulatively add up to something bigger? Something we'll be testing.
To a certain extent, and I understand largely this will be a subjective view of the officer who's making the assessment. I'm assuming we're comfortable with that. I will be comfortable with that, but I just want to make sure that we're all comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, again, we really do not want to create some lengthy vulnerability assessment and tell you how to do your job. You are the experts. These are tools to help surface and share those kind of red flags and indicators that you're picking up on. And then, giving them space to work in that way. Are there any other questions around vulnerability stuff?
I thought it was particularly interesting to try to cover benefits and as a needs officer, because that tells me we've got a lot more work to do around the culture in this service, because that person still sees themselves as purely a benefit assessor for the language they use. They don't see themselves as benefits and housing needs officer with more to offer than just assessing benefits. So that tells me we've got a lot more work to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been most interesting about trying this out is that it feels like this is, the tool is kind of like neither here nor there, but it's actually giving people something and permission to try something out that's actually been the most useful and beneficial.
Yeah, unfortunately, the assessors have had years of this is how many assessments per hour, this is how many days you're processing the change of certs in. And it's very, very difficult to get out of that mindset. Even that, and I've seen it time and time again, even though you know the claimant is 96, you cancel because there's been no response. Whereas actually, I know they're vulnerable. They should be doing a bit more, even if there is a visit.
All due respect, the 96 is probably 10.
I know, but it's.
Cool, thank you.
Just a comment. There are ordinary events, say, for example, a household having a new child, that could trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point about the cumulative
Yeah.
impact, basically.
Having a
Yeah.
cumulative impact on the circumstances that could lead to risk factors.
Yeah.
Nothing ordinary. So,
Yeah, so if you, I'll grab you afterwards, it'd be great if anyone has any other ideas about what those trigger events could be that could suggest that actually I want to understand a bit more about this person's context at this point in time to see if they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
Please grab me afterwards and I'll make a note of those.
That's right, yeah, I'm not Jennifer was saying on the benefit side. I was a bit disappointed. I had a case the other day and social services working with someone that's very vulnerable. They managed to get the benefits backdated as far as possible, but there was still a gap. But no one said, let's refer to housing options and advice to get a bit more help or anything like that. And I was quite disappointed actually that hadn't happened. So we do need a bit more of that. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why that's not happening. I've been round to the teams and done talk. We've spoken about it at staff briefings. I don't know what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. I think we need to look at how we prompt based on when
Yeah,
we
how do we
start with
prompt?
something.
You can
prompting
see someone's
someone to
vulnerable.
the next step.
There's a gap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do more than
Do
just
more
assess
than
the
just
benefit.
assess the benefit. Yeah. Do a referral or bring somebody and ask somebody's advice. Come over for a week on housing needs to see how we work. We still haven't done that.
Yeah. Check-ins. Make it something for check-ins.
Thank you.
Thanks, girl. Oh, that sounds very good.
So since the last show and tell, with Single View has undergone a Alpha Service Standard Assessment. So if anyone's unfamiliar with Service Standard Assessment, it's just a way for us to evaluate and identify learning so that we can improve and iterate on the service. And so the way it works is we have a panel that assess our service based on 14 government digital standards, and the outcome of our service standard assessment for Single View was that we got 12 fully met and we got 2 partially met, and the ones we got partially met were around accessibility and also for around ensuring that we're following the Hackney playbook. So one of the things we're trying to do as we move forward is always embed accessibility. So from the point where we're sketching to the point where we're prototyping to the point where we're building, always making sure that the system can be used by anyone and everyone. And also in terms of like the Hackney playbook up in ICT, we just want to make sure we're making consistent and providing a standard that can be reused across the council. The other thing we've been doing with Single View is, since we've been onboarding, we've noticed that we're getting feedback in a lot of different ways, and we want to try to kind of make sure we improve our feedback loop, because otherwise things will fall through the gaps and we'll miss stuff. So what we've done is I've spent some time going through our feedback form, going through all of our Slack channels and emails, and I've like logged all of the bugs and features into a nice board so that we can actually decide what we're going to do with those. And then our plan is to review the bugs with our team. So we started reviewing our bugs and getting them into our sprints or into the backlog. And then we also want to respond to the feedback that we get so that people know that they're being heard and that they're being listened to, so that we can kind of maintain, you know, how important it is that we value your feedback. And so that's our feedback loop. So if it's not working, just tell us and we'll again iterate, improve and keep going. Some of the bugs that we fixed since we've been doing feedback loop.
Yeah, so since we started doing the new feedback loop and actually sort of prioritizing bugs that seem most important to our users, we've managed to fix, it's really good, managed to fix our system IDs. So because we connect to several systems and sometimes one person has 2 records in one system, our IDs weren't showing correctly, so it wasn't quite easy for you to see sort of what data we were actually pulling out. So we fixed that over there. Then we also have a display of full tenancy history, so you can see exactly what's gone into throughout these tenants and 5 and separated out the contact numbers, so it's a lot easier for you to actually pick up the phone and call them. And I think the most important bug that's not represented on here was we finally got rid of that trailing space that used to prevent you from actually searching for users effectively and quickly in single view. And our other big release that we'd like to celebrate is now we have Camino docs. And we can see scans and stuff. So yeah, we've got Camino docs. Please use them, give us feedback, and we'll make sure to address that as soon as possible.
Next we plan to continue onboarding. The next team I think to onboard is the housing benefits team, and we also want to start to measure and see the value that's being provided by using the single view with the onboarding team. So those are the two things we're really going to focus on over the next spring.
Just on my, who have we got on it so far? Where are we up to with people testing and using single view?
Yeah, so we have people onboarded. The last thing we onboarded was the housing register team, and then we stopped because we found that there was some bugs, especially around like searching, and Camino docs was something they said that they find really valuable. So we thought we'd introduce Camino docs, make sure we got the search working a bit better than it was, and then start re-rolling it out to the rest of the team. So I've got quite a long list of people and teams to get it onboarded to, that we're going to get to everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
So with information and evidence, we've been making progress in two aspects of this project over the last 2 weeks. The first is we're continuing to test our waiting time calculator, and the second aspect is we're trying to make progress on improving the way that we get consistent and accurate messaging throughout the service. So with the waiting time calculator, we're still testing at the moment whether it can change residents' attitudes about whether they can, of their attitudes of the likelihood that they think they'll get a property off the housing register. So we're testing with the Queensbridge neighbourhood team, with the Settled Homes team, and with the Homerton neighbourhood team as well. And we're also seeing, probably over the next 2 weeks, whether we can come up with a test to embed the tool in the Mayor's Office responses to casework. So you might remember from the last show and tell that I showed you these charts. So as part of our test with the waiting time calculator, we are asking residents before they use the calculator how likely they think it is that they'll get a property off the register. So you can see before they use the calculator that they think the most likely outcome is likely or very likely, and then there's a real shift after they use the tool to very unlikely or unlikely. We now have some updated feedback from the last 2 weeks, and it kind of reinforces the findings that we found in the last sprint. We think what this shows clearly is that it can change attitudes, but we haven't yet tested the tool to see whether it can change behaviours. So by presenting this information to residents, can we encourage them to more proactively look into self-sourcing their own properties?
Quick question. That on your sample, what's your sample size for that?
So this is 16 people.
Chris, on that slide, you've now got people that still think it's very likely.
So that was just one looking at.
Yeah.
What was their actual waiting time? So are these new people on the register, or are they ones where they've been on it for a long time, they've got high priority, and they're being told you're going to get one within a year or whatever it might be?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point to make. So this person was actually making a transfer application. So they were coming into a neighbourhood office. Most people who come into a neighbourhood office are actually going to go into the general band. So their waiting time is actually going to be very, very long. I don't know if this person might have had more urgent needs than the general band, but as part of this test, we're not recording the wait time that's communicated to them. So we don't know why they've still said very likely after the test. The second aspect of the project that we've been making progress with is messaging. So we want to create consistent, accurate messaging throughout the service on housing expectations. We thought the best area to start developing our approach with this would be through the website. So over the last 2 weeks, we ran 5 drop-in sessions to improve how we communicate on the two most visited benefit and housing needs web pages. So that's Join the Housing Register and the Housing Options and Advice web pages. And what we wanted to learn was how can we improve these pages so that we better set housing expectations and we improve the way that we promote alternatives in the private rented sector. If we just focus on the Join the Housing Register webpage, we've got loads of beautiful feedback. My personal favourite from all the sessions was, it's too long, we don't want to be reading War and Peace. But people also raised important points around promoting housing options other than the register. We're not at the moment giving facts about the waiting times, and quite a lot of the information on the web pages didn't seem relevant. So how can we keep our message tighter? I think it's really important. Some other issues that were raised were that some of our key messages around setting housing expectations were not on the web page, but they're hidden behind a PDF. So some of you might know this document on the right, Social Housing in Hackney. That has quite a lot of facts and figures around how unlikely it is that you'll get social property in Hackney. But most people aren't clicking onto it at the moment because it's hidden in a PDF. Other points that were raised were around eligibility criteria not being prioritised. We don't really have clear messages on medical assessments and the consequences of an assessment on your likelihood of getting a property. We also don't have examples of people successfully finding housing alternatives in the private rented sector. So we ran a heat map on the Housing Register webpage, and some of the figures that we came away with were that 55% of page visitors were using a mobile device. So that's really important when we're thinking about that PDF document again, because most people can't, that PDF document isn't compatible with mobile devices, so we're not getting our messages home by using that PDF. 50% of all clicks are going straight to the Join the Register button, so this is the heat map on the right here, and this is the Join the Register button, which has got quite a lot of activity around it. And yeah, just to reinforce the point that the PDF is ineffective, only 3% of visitors clicked on that document. So we have a mock-up of how an updated version of the Housing Register page might look, which is behind me here. We prioritised changes like making the title more neutral. We wanted to set housing expectations early. We wanted to include wait times by bed size and band. We wanted to condense the content into a shorter space, which we did by using drop-down menus. And we wanted to promote housing alternatives. So if any of you would like to provide feedback on the updated version, I'm happy to hear your comments after the session. Sure.
Something I noticed and that's happening a lot of things is when you get to the part where they need to upload a document, they want to upload it. But when they get to that bit, they're not really having to click the drop down list, so they sort of stop the application there. And then they end up sitting there waiting for someone to get back to them. And then they expect people back to say, I've done it, no one's got back to me, I've done it. And I've realised it's because they haven't seen the option to the document. So I think we need to put some prompts on the screen for them to realise they need to make a selection to get a document.
Yeah.
That's when we move on to the end. Yeah.
That was something we were hearing a lot in the drop-in sessions, where people had assumed that they completed it, or that it was saved in some way, but then it was either lost, or that it was incomplete and they weren't hearing back for a while.
Is there potential to put a scroll bar in rather than a drop-down menu? So you just drag it, you have to scroll down and you get the information within a small window, but you know, scrolls up there.
A lot of them, a lot of customers that have the forms are longer than that, thinking they've finished it. And when you go on your shop to see if the forms are there, so we like to have a form. So it says submit.
Yeah, we were hearing a lot of that, so I think it's important that we keep that in mind. Just on our next steps with information and evidence, we want to embed the waiting time tool with how the Mayor's Office deal with housing casework. We're still interested in getting the waiting time calculator actually on the website so that we can have some larger tests and get some more feedback on the tool. And we also want to get both officer and resident feedback on the updated web pages around the housing register and the housing options and advice page as well. So there's going to be drop-in sessions next Tuesday for officers, so keep an eye out for a sign-off email which we sent out shortly.
I guess, how quickly can you get the new content actually on the website to see what users actually did there?
So the content we can get up quite quickly. The waiting time calculator, that needs a bit more development, so we're still unsure about how long that's going to take to get on the website. But once we have the calculator on there, I think we can help run various tests where we, I think just putting it on the website means we have greater capability to run different kinds of tests.
I'm assuming that you don't need to wait for the calculator to put the new content on, because there isn't a calculator now, so you're not making it any worse.
So that we can put up, yeah, we can put that up quite shortly. Any other questions?
So just to recap, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, we'll be continuing the work on the understanding vulnerability, but we'll be joining this up with creating a shared plan and hopefully kind of bring that all together to actually have something working that we can all show you and provide you. Information and evidence, as Chris just mentioned, we're going to be doing all the things. And then single view, we're going to continue testing and hopefully onboarding the new teams of benefits. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. Have a good Wednesday, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Yeah, please come and have a look at the new website.
Oh my God,